Hello everyone. In this video, I will be discussing a few samples of thesis statements from my students' work. Okay, let's look at thesis statement sample number 1. Let's read it together. Basically, climate change caused the sea level to rise, which affect the coastal area. Here we provide 4 solutions, which is mitigation, retreat, settlement in regions, and land raising. So as you can see, the first problem here is that this thesis statement has 2 sentences, but thesis statement should be only 1 sentence. Number 2, there are some grammatical problems here. So if we want to fix these 2 problems, then the alternative would be something like this sentence. Also, the word basically here is not really necessary, so we can delete it. As you can see in the first sentence, here we provide 4 solutions, which marks a new sentence, was combined in the form of which can be dealt with by using the 4 solutions in the second alternative. So the second alternative here is much better than the first one because number 1, it doesn't have the grammatical errors, and number 2, instead of 2 sentences here, we have 1 sentence here. However, we can still make it better. Let's look at alternative number 3. So for example, here in alternative number 2, we repeat the word which 2 times, which affects the coastal area, which can be dealt with by using the 4 solutions of. So in the third alternative, which affects was reduced to affecting, which is a much better option. So in the end, the first sample was changed to climate change causes the sea level to rise, affecting the coastal area, which can be dealt with using the 4 solutions of mitigation, retreat, settlement in regions, and land raising. Now let's go to the thesis statement sample number 2. Okay, let's read it together. It is recommended to use the social media by limiting its use to reduce the effect on it. Okay, as you can see, the first problem with this thesis statement is that it is very obvious. So it is not a good thesis statement because a good thesis statement shows argument. So for example, here, limiting the use of something naturally reduces its effect. So when I say that we use social media by limiting its use to reduce the effect on it, which is actually wrong, it should be its effect here, then of course it is something very obvious and clear. So this is not a good thesis statement. The second problem is that thesis statement is part of the introduction, while recommendation is part of the conclusion. Here, when we say the word it is recommended to, here, basically, it is not a feature of thesis statement. In the thesis statement, we don't make recommendations. We keep them for conclusion. And number 3, it is not specific enough. So we know that from the first thesis statement here, we know that it is recommended to use social media by limiting its use to reduce the effects. So we know that there are effects here, but we don't know what are the effects. So let's change the thesis statement into the following sentence. The effects of social media on, and of course here I can use a group of people, are A and B, which can be solved by limiting its use. Now what can we put here? I mean, in the first, second, and the third gaps here, depends on your findings. For example, the effects on social media on students are low academic performance and high anxiety, which can be solved by limiting its use. Of course, depending on your paper, you might want to change them. For example, the effects of social media on teenagers, on adults, and of course here, the effect number 1 and 2, or even maybe you have more than one effect. So it doesn't matter. Let's go to thesis statement sample 3. Okay, let's read it together. The causes and solutions of youth unemployment need to be assessed immediately to overcome the problem effectively. So what is the first problem? The first problem is that, again, it is very obvious. Of course, immediate assessment of the problem helps us overcome it more effectively. So this is nothing special. Everybody can agree on it. So basically, there is nothing special to it which can make it a thesis statement. Number 2, it looks like a suggestion which can be appeared in the conclusion. Again, thesis statement is part of the introduction. When here we say that the causes and solutions of unemployment need to be assessed immediately, we are making a suggestion. And the place to make a suggestion is in the conclusion, at the end of the paper. Hence, let's change it. Again, this one is not specific. We know there are causes and there are solutions. Maybe we should talk about them. So here is the better version. The causes of youth unemployment are A and B, and the solutions are A and B. Of course, you can fill out these gaps based on the information and the data that you have. Okay, let's go to thesis statement sample 4. Therefore, there are some advantages and disadvantages of social media usage from the students' perspectives all around the world. So what is the first problem with this? Therefore. We do not use therefore in the thesis statement. Therefore is used in a concluding sentence. Number 2, all over the world. This is a very broad and hard claim to prove. So if I make this claim in my thesis statement, then in my paper, I should be looking at the students' perspectives from all over the world: French, Japanese, American, Malaysian, and so on and so forth, which I think is not possible in a few page long paper. The other problem is the word some advantages. It is not clear. We should be more specific. What are the advantages and disadvantages? So, this is one alternative from French, Chinese, and Malaysian students' perspectives. The advantages of social media are A and B, and the disadvantages of social media are C and D. So what did I do? First of all, I made it more specific. Instead of the students all around the world, I specified which students I am talking about. So I limited to French, Chinese, and Malaysian. Again, it depends on my data. And then I gave the advantages and disadvantages instead of using the word some. However, what is the meaning of this sentence? From this sentence, it can be implied that French, Chinese, and Malaysian students all agree on A and B and C and D, meaning that they all agree on the advantages and disadvantages, meaning that the advantages and disadvantages are the same for all of them. But maybe in your data, the advantages are different for each group. Therefore, we can make changes accordingly. For example, this is an option. From French, Chinese, and Malaysian students' perspectives, the advantages of social media are respectively. Now, when we use respectively, it means that in the same order. So French students are mentioned here first. So A is the advantage of social media for French students. Chinese are mentioned second. So the advantage of social media for Chinese students is B, and Malaysian students, the advantage would be C. And the disadvantage of social media from French students is D. So it means that French students believe the disadvantage is D, while Malaysian and Chinese students agree on E. So this one is more specific, but again, it depends on the data you have. From this thesis statement, we will imply that French, Chinese, and Malaysian students, they look at different advantages. But French students look at a different advantage, while Chinese and Malaysian students look at the same disadvantage. Okay, let's look at thesis statement sample 5. There are some factors of occupational stress and ways to manage it, since the stress brings negative effects to individual and groups. Again, there are some problems. The first problem, of course, is that some is not clear. There are some factors. There are ways to manage it. Again, these are not clear. We should say what are the factors and what are the ways to manage it. And second, the stress, of course, brings negative effects of people to people. So here, when I say, since the stress brings negative effects, of course, here there is a grammatical problem, brings negative effects to individuals and groups. So there is another grammatical problem here. But basically, this is not necessary. We do not need it because it is an obvious claim. And the third problem, are there really differences between individuals and groups? Because according to this thesis statement, I would understand that the effects of the stress on individuals and groups might be different. If they are the same, then we really do not need to mention that here. But if they are different, then we can make the thesis statement accordingly. So let's look at the first alternative. The effects of occupational stress are A and B, and the most effective ways to manage them are A and B. So it means that we have the same occupational stress effects for individuals and groups. But if they have different effects to different groups, then here we can change the thesis statement accordingly. The effects of occupational stress on individuals and groups are respectively, again, you know the word respectively, meaning that the first one here is related to the first one mentioned here. And B, the second effect is related to groups. And the most effective ways to manage them for both groups, or even if we have different ways to manage a stress for different groups, for individuals and groups are different, then again we can mention here. But in this case, for example, this thesis statement shows that we can use the same way or the same ways to manage the stress for both groups are A and B. Or maybe here you have three ways, then actually you can use A, comma, B, and C. Okay, so we talked about a few thesis statement samples. Thank you very much.